This is the Louie Tee Network.
In the lab room.
The views and opinions shared on this program are that of Louie Tee and In the Lab Room alone and should be taken exactly as they are given. If you are soft, easily offended, or can't listen to the criticism of your team, this program is not intended for you. This is pure, unadulterated football talk for the hardcore fan. Viewer discretion is advised.
I'm back! Did you miss me? Welcome. You are in the lab room. I am your host, Lou. Thank you for joining me here on this program. Feels like I've been away for a while, and you've got to admit, you miss me. You miss me. Come on, you know you did. But I'm back. Teams are starting to filter into training camp. Things are starting to get kicked off. And so I'm going to be doing my annual lab reports. Now, for those of you who don't know what this is, and first of all, let me say to all of you who are new subscribers, thank you and welcome aboard. And to all of my old friends, welcome back. All of you alike, I want to tell you a quick story. I don't know if you know this or not. Most of you probably don't. When I first started this channel, this very series was the first one that I did. Lab reports. I started out, I think it was August of 2010 or 2011. Time flies. Either way, I started out doing lab reports. And basically what lab reports are breakdowns of each team's off-season, essentially, looking at camp battles and everything that's going to transpire over the next couple of months, or month, I should say, to shape the roster, pretty much get you geared up for the season. And then I'm going to give you my prediction as to how I feel that team is going to do in the upcoming league year. So I'll be breaking down all of the things from camp up into the season, and from there on through the season, and giving you my predictions short of the Super Bowl. I'm not doing playoff predictions or who's going to win the Super Bowl or anything like that. Just giving you an outlook for that team's upcoming season. And so this is sort of my baby. The In the Lab Room program itself, which is a daily show, is the flagship program of this channel. But lab reports, they're my baby because they were the first program, the first series that I actually did, and I really enjoyed doing these. And probably the part of it that I enjoy the most is it's unfiltered. That's why I give you that advisory warning at the beginning, because during the draft wrap-up series, everybody feels so good about their team. You got a chance. There's hope. And I'm one of those guys that I don't like to be a dream killer, period. You know, who am I to tell you that your team can't be the Arizona Cardinals of 2010? Who am I to tell you that your team can't go from worst to first? However, all the optimism that I have during the draft wrap-up series disappears during this series, okay? I'm here to tell you that this is not that. This is a more realistic look on how I feel about your team in the upcoming season. Most of you aren't going to like what I say, and guess what? I don't care. So if you're soft and you easily are offended and you get mad when someone tells you something you don't want to hear about your team, then guess what? This is not the program for you. And so I'm going to give it to you straight, no chaser. It's going to be a lot of fun. And so you've been warned. With that said, these are the lab reports. And basically taking you back to school here. It's a play on the lab portion of my title where I'm basically doing, and we've all done these in the 9th or 10th or 11th or 12th grade, lab reports where you go out and you conduct an experiment. You got your research question, you've got your hypothesis, your independent variable, your dependent variable. All of those things are going to be done here. We're basically doing an experiment, but before we get to that, we're going to look at strengths, weaknesses of all of the teams that are going to be broken down, which will be all 32, and we're going to look at the camp battles. And so it's a very extensive look at the teams going into the season and moving forward. And so without any further ado, I introduce to you the 2014 lab reports. And I'm going in a specific order. Everything I do on my show has a rhyme and a reason. And so I'll see if you pick up on it. Eventually, I'm pretty sure a lot of you are really smart out there. You'll figure out what it is I'm doing. This is not the Who's Next format. So don't bother sending me messages about wanting your team to be next. Your team will get their opportunity here on this program. And one more thing, just in case you didn't catch the trailer for this series, this will be aired at 7 p.m. every single day, Monday through Sunday. So there's no days off. Weekends are included as well. So there will be a new video uploaded until we complete this series every single day at 7 p.m. sharp. Basically training myself to make sure that I am hitting my benchmarks, so when we start the brand new season of In the Lab Room, I can start hitting these times, because I want you to know when these programs are going to be on. I want to be prompt. I want you to know that at X time this program will be up and you can view it at your own discretion. So let's start with the Buffalo Bills, shall we? It's the 2014 lab reports. Buffalo Bills. So you start with the Buffalo Bills. And here's a team that I'm somewhat intrigued by. Obviously, looking at their offseason and more specifically their draft, you've got to feel like the Bills are pushing their chips to the middle of the table, and they feel like this is the year that they're going to finally break that playoff drought. So you start with the strengths of this team, and the first thing that I look at with this Bills team as a strength is their defense. And their defense wasn't great, but it was a really solid defensive unit. And I want to be more specific when I talk strengths for this Bills defense. Let's talk about the pressure that they applied on the quarterback last year. Who saw this coming? Raise your hand. I know I didn't see 57 sacks coming from this Bills unit. More specifically, their front four, who provided 41 of those 57 sacks, which was good enough for second in the league, only behind 60 from the Carolina Panthers. So this Bills defense was generating pressure on the quarterback. Jerry Hughes had a career year. Mario Williams looked like the guy that they paid all of that money to. Williams and Darius were stout in the middle, and Kyle Williams looked like a man possessed last year. All in all, that Bills defense generated pressure, and it basically was the perfect storm for a lot of those players, and you're hoping that they can continue to do that. A lot of that credit needs to go to the defensive coordinator, Mike Patton, and his scheme, which just allowed these guys to go and hunt the quarterback. I've got questions about that, and we'll talk about that here in a second, but this Bills defense was very aggressive getting after the quarterback, which leads into and really ties into another one of their strengths on the defensive side of the football, and that's generating turnovers. This Bills defense had 23 interceptions last year. That was good enough for second behind the Seattle Seahawks. And so they were getting their hands on the quarterback. They were forcing pressure. In turn, that pressure was helping them generate errant throws, and they were taking advantage of those errant throws by picking them also. This Bills defense, one of their strengths has to be their defensive pressure and their ability to get their hands on the football from that pressure, something that they need to look to continue doing in 2014. You move on to another strength of this team, and it's the rushing attack. And it's funny because after they lost Andy Levitre in free agency last year, I thought this Bills offensive line was going to be affected in this running attack and its two-headed monster of Fred Jackson, Fred X, and CJ Spiller were going to be affected negatively. And they just kept on trucking. It wasn't as easy as it was a season ago, but they found a way to plug up those holes and to open up space for CJ Spiller and Fred Jackson. And they got it done on the ground again. They were second in the league in rushing yards a season ago. And so they're still able to run the football. And that is definitely something that they're going to have to continue to do, especially with a question mark at the quarterback position with E.J. Manuel. Will he take that next step or not? That is debatable. We'll talk about that as we continue to go along in this process. But this rushing attack for the Buffalo Bills is something that has been a staple, and that is definitely a strength. Speaking of which, CJ Spiller and his explosiveness is another strength of this Buffalo Bills team. You look at this Bills team and their ability to have explosive runs, and it all starts with CJ Spiller. The Bills had 9 rushes of over 20 yards last season. That was good for second in the league, as well as 4 runs of 40 yards or more, and that was tops in the National Football League. So CJ Spiller gives you that extra added dimension that few teams have out of the backfield, and that is a home run threat each and every single time he touches the football. So this Bills team and their explosiveness on the ground is also a strength going forward, something that they look to continue. Again, these are all things that they did well last year that they're looking to continue to do if they want to try to add to their win total moving forward in 2014. So now you go from strengths to weaknesses. Weaknesses for the Buffalo Bills. To me, you start at the top. Instability is the biggest weakness for this Bills football team. And there's so many different levels that you got to peel back when you're talking instability with this Bills organization. You could start at the top if you like, about their ownership situation and who's going to take control of this team. I'm not interested in that. Let's talk about the instability on the field. And of course, the elephant in the room is E.J. Manuel, and can he stabilize the quarterback position? And look, let's face it, the Bills can play as well as they want to on defense. Get as many sacks and turnovers, and they can rush the football as well as they want to, because they did all of those things extremely well last year. If E.J. Manuel isn't ready to take that next step and prove that he is first round worthy and prove that he is the franchise quarterback of this team moving forward, then everything else is insignificant. And so they need stability at the quarterback position, do the Buffalo Bills. You look at another instability of this team, and this is one that really worries me just as much as the E.J. Manuel situation. And that's defensively. This is the third coordinator on the defensive side of the football in the last 3 seasons for this Bills defense. And I really felt like they were building something defensively after the campaign they turned in last year. I would have loved to have seen Mike Pettin come back, but I told you last year, and for those of you who have been watching, you know how I feel about Mike Pettin. And I told you, I said, don't be surprised if this man gets a head coaching job here in the near future. I absolutely love Mike Pettin. And obviously the guys loved playing for him. And you saw it on the field last year. But keep in mind, you had Dave Wanstead in 2012. Last year it was Mike Pettin's defense. This year it's going to be ex-Lions head coach Jim Schwartz's defense. And so 3 different coordinators in 3 different seasons. How will this Bills defense respond? I have my doubts. I'm a little worried that all of this change isn't going to be good for this defense. We'll see if they can respond and turn this potential weakness into a strength. And another instability on this team is the injury to Kiko Alonso. That injury is so huge. I liken it to an injury that occurred in one of these mini camps for the Dallas Cowboys with their linebacker, Sean Lee. Just one of those guys that impacts the game so greatly. You were moving him from the inside linebacker position to weak side linebacker in hopes that he could run with these tight ends and still impact the game the way that he did from the middle linebacker position. You getting spikes from the Patriots was going to allow you to put that thumper in the middle of your defense, and he was going to be outside, and this was going to look like a formidable linebacking core. Now you take him out of the mix with that torn ACL, and all of a sudden this linebacking core isn't as strong as it once was. And so there's some more instability for you if you're the Buffalo Bills moving forward. You go to another weakness, and I call it the lack of know-how. And essentially what I'm saying is the lack of knowing how to win in this league. This Bills team had opportunities, and I'll give you one prime example of them not knowing how to win. I watched this Bills team absolutely dominate the Atlanta Falcons over in Canada last year in a game that they should have won. There was no reason. The Falcons, they were not a good football team last year. And I watched the Bills dominate them in that football game. But fumbles in regulation by Stevie Johnson and one in overtime by Scott Chandler ultimately cost you that football game, allowed the Falcons to come back and steal that game from you in overtime, and you lose a game that you should have won. Good teams in this league don't do that. And so this Bills team, and we know this is a game of inches, this football thing that we love so much. It's a game of inches. And a lot of these games are going to come down to a touchdown or less. And it's all about making those plays at the end of the game and throughout the course of the game that help you get over the top. And this Bills team, for some reason or another, don't seem to be able to make the plays when necessary to get it done. They've got to figure out that formula. And sometimes it just comes with time. Sometimes it comes with continuity. The Bills are starting to build a little bit of both. They've got to figure out how to get it done in this league. You had the New England Patriots on the ropes in week 1 at home, and you let them off the hook last season. Those are the type of games that if you want to take that next step and get back to the postseason and end this drought, you're going to have to find a way to win those types of games. And lastly, another weakness for this team is special teams. We know that in this league, special teams is a huge part of whether you win or lose. That's one of those facets of the game that you've got to win. In order to win on a weekly basis in this league, you need to win 2 out of the 3 facets of the game. And special teams, along with offense and defense, are those 3 facets. You got to find a way to win special teams. A lot of times, that's the difference between you winning a game and losing a game, and you got nothing out of your special teams return units a season ago. Absolutely nothing. And you want to know the funny part? Is that I thought that Marquise Goodwin was going to be a jolt of energy and breathe life into this Bills return team. After Leotis McKelvin had a special year a couple of years ago, I thought he's going to handle things from the punt return side. And Marquise Goodwin, remember preseason last year? He came out of the gate, had 2 touchdowns on kickoff returns, and this guy was electrifying, and you thought, oh man, we got something here. He did nothing during the regular season, and so I'd love to see Marquise Goodwin kick it back into high gear and start making some things happen on special teams, more specifically the kickoff return unit. You need something from your special teams in the returns game if you're going to take that next step. That was a huge weakness, something that you need to improve upon in 2014 if you want to win some more games. So we go from there to camp battles. So you move on to camp battles for this Buffalo Bills team, and throughout this series, I'll be using the assistance of my big board when talking about experiments as well as camp battles. And so the Bills have several camp battles that you want to focus in on in training camp, and that is going to help shape and mold this roster. The first one that I want to talk about is at the fullback position. The incumbent fullback, Frank Summers, tried to keep his job versus Evan Rodriguez. I like Frank Summers a lot. I think this guy is a little bit more versatile than he's given credit for. He can run the football. He's shown the propensity to catch it as well. He's a solid lead blocker, and he gives you extra value on special teams. I don't see how, barring injury, he doesn't make this roster, how he does not secure his spot on this roster. Now, Evan Rodriguez is an intriguing guy, very athletic, that was drafted a few years ago by the Chicago Bears, flamed out in Chicago. Now he's looking to find a home. If he can impress the coaches, maybe he can come and upset Frank Summers and take his job. I'm a Frank Summers guy. I expect him to win that battle. You move on to the receiver position, and this is a situation where there's 7 receivers for 6 spots, and you go Sammy Watkins, Mike Williams, Robert Woods, Marquise Goodwin, Marcus Easley, Chris Hogan, T.J. Graham. And if you want to, you can throw in Ramses Barden. I'll talk about him a little bit later. But really, what it all boils down to is you can get rid of that 6 for 7, or excuse me, 7 for 6. So you can basically forget about that and just go here to 3 for 2. That's basically what this is 3 receivers for 2 spots, because we can basically make an assumption and say that Sammy Watkins, Mike Williams, Robert Woods, and Marquise Goodwin are all locks to make this roster. So just take them out of the equation. It's 3 receivers for 2 spots. Marcus Easley and Chris Hogan, a.k.a. 7-Eleven, are 2 guys that help you immensely on special teams. Chris Hogan, to me, even gives you a little bit of value as a receiver as well. Easily not so much. So those 2 are going to have legitimate shots at remaining on this roster. T.J. Graham could easily be the odd man out, because now with the addition of Sammy Watkins, you bring more speed and size to the table. T.J. Graham has been somewhat disappointing since being drafted out of North Carolina State. And now that Marquise Goodwin has come in and basically fills that role of the small guy with a lot of speed, T.J. Graham has to come in and show improve, or he's going to find himself on the outside looking in. Now, Easley and Hogan provide you with a lot of special teams depth, and T.J. Graham is going to have to not only perform as a receiver throughout the preseason and training camp, but he's also going to have to prove his worth on special teams. Now, Ramses Barden is a very interesting receiver. Here's a guy from the Giants that is 6'6". You can't teach that type of height, that can go up and make plays on the football, is a pretty fast receiver for his size. Think that if he finds the right location, he can actually help a football team. He will give you something at the receiver position that you currently lack, and that's elite size. At 6'6", there's not another receiver on your roster that has that type of size. So he's a guy that you could look out for in camp. He's had a cup of tea with the Giants and actually had a 100-yard receiving game on primetime television against the Panthers a few years ago. So he can play football, but I just don't know if there's enough room on this roster for him. We'll see. But I think that the three that you're really focusing in on is easily Hogan and Graham. I think they're going to be battling it out for the final 2 receiver spots. And really, it depends on how the Bills decide to pinch, because they're going to have to cut some corners. With that injury to Kiko Alonso comes some question marks at that linebacker position. Now some guys, and I'm about to get to that linebacker position here shortly, but now they're going to have to probably keep an extra linebacker on this roster just to fill in that void. So maybe they end up pinching a receiver spot. Maybe they only keep 5 versus 6. I don't know. We'll see. But that's just some food for thought at the receiver position. You move on to right tackle. Eric Pierce has been a solid right tackle for this Bills football team, but you drafted Cyrus Kouandjio out of Alabama in the 2nd round. He's a guy that you are looking to start. If Cyrus Kouandjio comes in, performs well, picks up the offense, and shows you why you spent a 2nd round pick on him right away, he could easily wrestle that job away from Eric Pierce. You want him to win that job. Nothing will be given to him. That'll be something worth keeping an eye on in camp. You look at the linebacker position, and really, it's a smorgasbord at the linebacker position after the injury to Kiko Alonso. So everybody but Brandon Spikes has to protect their job. And so right now it looks like Nigel Bradham and Keith Rivers are going to be your starting outside linebackers, which if you're a Bills fan, you cannot be comfortable with. You've been running away from starting Nigel Bradham. Looks like he's going to get the opportunity to start. And you're hoping someone wrestles that job away from him. And Keith Rivers, I'm here to tell you that the guy has all the talent in the world, is a huge physical specimen, but cannot stay healthy. His production and his 1st round draft status has not been met since he's been in the league via injuries and lack of production. I don't see him just turning on the light switch here. Maybe this is a situation where he gets another fresh start because he was drafted by the Bengals, did nothing in Cincinnati, was traded to New York, thought he played a little bit better in New York. Now he's going to get another opportunity in Buffalo. We'll see. But that's an unimpressive unit, if I may say so myself, with Bradham and Rivers. You're hoping that Preston Brown, your 3rd round selection out of Louisville, can come in and wow you and maybe wrestle one of those spots away. But, you know, it's hard for rookies to come in and immediately start, especially at a position like linebacker. So we will see what that situation ends up being in Buffalo. You move on to the cornerback position. Much like receiver, 6 players for only 5 positions on this team. And so you look at Stephon Gilmore, Leotis McKelvin, Nikel Roby, Corey Graham, Ross Cockrell, and Ron Brooks. Essentially, much like the receiver position, 4 of those guys are locks. So you essentially can take Stephon Gilmore, Leotis McKelvin, Nikel Roby, who had a breakout season last year, as your nickel corner, I guess aptly titled. His name fits it perfectly. Nikel Roby, nickel corner. Forget it. And Corey Grant. You went out and got him in free agency, or you wrestled him away from the Baltimore Ravens. He's making this roster as well. So now you've got 2 guys battling it out for that final roster spot at the cornerback position. Ross Cockrell is a guy you drafted out of Duke in, I believe, the 4th round. And he's got a really good upside versus Ron Brooks, a guy that you drafted a few years ago out of Florida State. Hasn't really been a guy that you can rely on. He's been okay, but you feel like maybe you can upgrade that position. Cockrell is a little bit bigger and can do some things that Ron Brooks maybe can't. And so it'll be interesting to see, can Ron Brooks hold off the young Cockrell from taking his roster spot? If Brooks can somehow hold him off, Cockrell will then probably be relegated to the practice squad if he in fact clears waivers. So we'll see how that works out. But 2 players for 1 roster spot, Ross Cockrell and Ron Brooks, will probably be battling it out for that final cornerback roster spot. And so now you move on to punter. Brian Moorman is the incumbent punter, a guy that you had twilight years ago. You got rid of him. Then you realize it's really not a safe punting market out here. Sometimes you realize the grass isn't always greener on the other side. You bring Moorman back, and it's just not the same anymore. He's no longer that Pro Bowl punter that he once was. And so Jake Dombrowski is a guy that you brought in as an undrafted rookie free agent out of Harvard. And so we'll see if he can come in and wrestle that job away from Brian Moorman. And last but not least, and this is a really interesting dynamic here, is kicker. Your place kicker situation, it's a good problem to have. Dan Carpenter was your kicker last year. Now, you didn't intend for him to be. You drafted Dustin Hopkins, and anytime you spend a draft pick on a kicker, you want that guy on your roster. Normally, on any type of specialist, whether it be punter or kicker, if you spend a pick on that guy, he's going to make your roster. Well, Dustin Hopkins gets injured last year. In comes Dan Carpenter, and all he did was turn in one of the greatest field goal kicking seasons in Buffalo Bills history, going 33 of 36, setting a personal career high 92% field goal percentage made. And so it's going to be pretty hard to tell Dan Carpenter that, hey, even though you just set a franchise record for us and you were money from long distance last year and money for us in general, 4 of 6 from plus 50 yards and 10 of 11 from what I deem the money distance, 40 to 49 yards. It's going to be hard to tell Dan Carpenter that he didn't kick well enough to keep his job. This is my whole theory on kickers. You go with the guy that's proven himself. Dan Carpenter proved himself once again last year. If Dustin Hopkins doesn't come in and absolutely blow you away in camp, I think you got to tell Dustin Hopkins to hit the bricks. Dan Carpenter should be your kicker if he comes out and continues to be consistent throughout camp. And so we go from there to the experiment. And I aptly titled this experiment, Nobody, and I mean nobody, misses the playoffs like the Buffalo Bills. Nobody misses the playoffs like the Buffalo Bills. And it's interesting because we all know the longest playoff drought in the National Football League belongs to the Buffalo Bills. And so their head coach recently came out and said, hey, we owe it to the fans. We're going to make the playoffs this year. Look, who doesn't say that? What do you expect Doug Marrone to say? Well, I hope we play well enough this season that we'll make some improvements. No, nobody's going to say that. Everybody, you talk to any player on any team, any coach, they're going to tell you we're going to make the playoffs this year. They're supposed to say that. But nobody's found a way to miss the playoffs longer and more often than the Buffalo Bills. So we move on to the research question. Will the marriage of Marrone and Manuel, Eminem, and I talked about this last year at the draft, these two are married to one another. These two are tied at the hip. They're jointed at the hip. If Doug Marrone is going to remain the head coach in Buffalo, then E.J. Manuel must be the quarterback in Buffalo. If Manuel doesn't work out, then Marrone ultimately will be fired. So it's got to be E.J. Manuel for Doug Marrone or else. So will the marriage of Marrone and Manuel, coupled with a potentially good Bills D, be enough to help the Bills end the playoff drought? And that's the big question. Can the Bills sustain the amount of success and get better on defense? Can they continue to force turnovers? We know turnovers are a thing that happens from year to year. One year, you could be one of the best teams in the league at generating turnovers. The next year, you could have little to no success at generating turnovers. It's a hit or miss thing with turnovers. Sometimes you've got playmakers and guys that are just magnets with the football, and they attract the football, and Jarius Byrd was one of those guys for you. He's no longer on this roster, so you're going to have to see if you can continue to generate turnovers if you are the Bills and continue to get after the quarterback and get pressure. So this Bills defense is going to be huge in the Bills' success, along with, of course, the maturation of E.J. Manuel. You move on to the hypothesis. If E.J. Manuel can prove his first round worth and the defense can continue to build off of 2013's momentum, then the Bills can begin to rise in the AFC East pecking order. Okay, so that's the hypothesis. You need E.J. Manuel to step up. You need this Bills defense to continue to build on the momentum that they built a season ago. And if you get those two things coupled with each other, this Bills team could easily ascend in this division. This division isn't a world beater. This isn't the NFC West, okay? This isn't a division where you can't make headway. This isn't the NFC South. This isn't the NFC North. Do you get where I'm going with this? Yes, the NFC is the superior conference right now. This division has the Dolphins and the Jets in it. Teams that you can leapfrog easily in this division if you can sustain some type of success. So that's the hypothesis. We move on to materials needed for this to happen. Winning Manual. You need E.J. Manuel to step up. Over here, you have a losing pamphlet, and over here, you have a winning Manual. If you're the Buffalo Bills, you need E.J. Manuel to step up and learn how to win in this league. He needs to stay healthy. The offensive line has to protect him. He has to make better decisions. You need E.J. Manuel to step up, and he needs to be the winning Manual. And so, you move on to the next needed material. The Bills are only going to go as far as E.J. Manuel takes them. Remember that. Spiller is a thriller. C.J. Spiller has to be your thriller. You need C.J. Spiller to make those explosive plays that I talked about when we were talking about strengths for this Bills team. We talked about those plus 40 runs and the Bills leading the league in that. C.J. Spiller. We talked about the Bills being second in the league in explosive runs over 20 yards. C.J. Spiller was a large part of that. And so you need C.J. Spiller to go over 1,000 yards rushing. You need him to crack that 1,000-yard threshold. You need him to catch the football out of the backfield. You need to get this man the football, block for him, and watch him work. He's a dynamic athlete that has the potential to do big things in this league. You just got to get him the football, and you got to get it to him in space. The man can do some dynamic things. You just got to give him the space to operate. C.J. Spiller is a thriller. That's what you need if you are the Buffalo Bills. Then, the next needed material, give it up for Mr. Sammy Watkins. You got to get Sammy Watkins going. We're hearing out of training camp early on that this guy is phenomenal. He's the best thing since sliced bread, yada, yada, yada. That's what you expect to hear because this guy was someone that you went up and gave up. You essentially spent 2 first-round picks on this guy. So you need him to provide dividends right away. And if you're the Bills, you got to create ways because he's still a guy that needs to learn how to run the entire route tree. Didn't run a lot of, specific routes. Didn't run the entire spectrum of routes at Clemson. They just got him the football. He was a playmaker. They found ways to get the football in his hands. You need to do the same thing, all the while teaching this guy the ropes and on how to be a great receiver in this league and getting him to run all of the routes on the route tree. That will happen. But in the meantime, if you're the Bills, you got to give it up for Mr. Sammy Watkins. Moving on. D-line encore. Do you want an encore? Do you want more? Yes, if you're the Buffalo Bills, you want a defensive line encore. You got 41 total sacks out of your front four. And they were dominant last year. 3 guys with over double-digit sacks. That is unheard of on one line. Jerry Hughes came out of nowhere. I mean, this guy was an afterthought. You traded him. You traded with the Indianapolis Colts for peanuts to get this guy. He was a failed experiment in Indianapolis. They spent a first-round pick on this guy. Didn't pan out. You had a guy that you weren't that thrilled about. You got swapped, and you got a stud. Now, can he follow up on that season that he had a season ago? We'll see. But he had double-digit sacks. The Williams boys, man, they went to work last year. Kyle and Super Mario, they went to work last year. And Marcel Darius is coming into his own as well. If you can get that kind of production out of your defensive line again, this defense is going to be good once again. Goodwin, gone. You need Marquise Goodwin to prove to be an asset on special teams, more specifically in the returns game. Look, in the preseason last year, this guy looked like he was going to be lights out. He looked like he was going to be I'm talking about at least 2 kickoff returns for a touchdown. Jacoby Jones-like. And then we got nothing once the regular season hit. Some of it due to injury, some of it due to lack of blocking. Whatever the case may be, I want to see Marquise Goodwin gone this season. I want to see him taken off, and he didn't even have to score a touchdown. If he can bust off a 53-yard return, 62 yards, and put you already in the opposing team's territory, almost in field goal range, look, you'll take it every single time. And so if he can get some big returns and then eventually bust a few, that's going to help you immensely in 2014. Goodwin, gone. That's what you need. You need Marquise Goodwin to be an asset on the kickoff return team. You move on to the independent variable. Simply put, E.J. Manuel. E.J. Manuel has to step up. He's the independent variable. He's what everything essentially hinges upon. Because if he gets injured again, you're dealing with Thad Lewis and Jeff Toole. God help us all if Jeff Toole has to see the field again. So, look, E.J. Manuel has to stay healthy. E.J. Manuel has to play winning football. All right? He's got to take that monumental quantum leap in 2014. That leap from freshman year to sophomore year in college as a starter is usually a big one. Same thing in the NFL. If you had a tremendous rookie season, you're looking to build upon it. Sometimes you come back down crashing to earth. Other times you ascend. He needs to take that leap from wide-eyed rookie trying to make the transition from college to the NFL to a guy that has seen it, has done it, is comfortable in his own skin, understands what this team is looking for from him, and he needs to play football. Again, if you don't have a quarterback in this league, you don't have a chance. E.J. Manuel has to prove that he is, in fact, the guy in Buffalo. And everything hinges upon his success on this football team. So you go from the independent variable to the dependent variable. And because E.J. Manuel has success, that's going to put more points on the scoreboard. And if you can do that, in turn, your dependent variable is pressure and turnovers. Because if E.J. Manuel and this Bills offense can somehow find a way to put up 25 points a game, this Bills defense will be good enough to hold teams to 24 points or less. And just keep in mind, the more points you score, the less likely it is the other team will be able to run the football. They're going to have to take to the air. And what did the Bills do a season ago? They got after the quarterback. Nothing better than when you have a team that can get after the quarterback. Nothing better than you knowing they have to throw the football. So you can pin your ears back and go much faster than slow. And so if you can get the lead, have it late in ball games, now your defensive line gets to go after the quarterback. You get to go after the quarterback, and if you can hit home, as we saw last year, you can generate turnovers. Bills, again, forced a lot of turnovers last year, especially in the interception department. So that's your dependent variable. If EJ Manuel, as the independent variable, can get it done, help this offense score points, pressure and turnovers will come, and that will be the deciding factor in Buffalo potentially if you guys are playing good football. The constant in Buffalo, the running game. Talked about that a little earlier with CJ Spiller and Fred X. And Fred's getting up there in age. You go out and get Bryce Brown, which I thought was a huge acquisition in the offseason. This guy is going to add another dimension to your running attack, especially if anything were to happen to one of your running backs, whether it be Fred Jackson or CJ Spiller. Bryce Brown will fill in admirably. You'll love this guy if he doesn't fumble. That's the only knock on Bryce Brown, is that he is sloppy with the football and he will put it on the carpet. If he can clean that up and hold on to the football, got yourself a gem at the running back position. And so the running game I thought was going to suffer after the departure of Andy Levitre. But I was wrong. This Bills offense held it together. And lo and behold, second most rush yards in the league a season ago. So the running game has been pretty consistent, whether it's Fred X carrying the load or CJ Spiller or both. This running game has been one of the few constants in Buffalo over the last few seasons. And now you end up at the conclusion for this Bills team. What does all of this mean? Looking at this team, I've got some good news and I've got some bad news. Normally, when you got good news and you got bad news, you want the bad news first. Hey, I'm a glass half full guy, so I'll give you the good news first. The good news is you won't lose more games than you did a season ago. The bad news is you won't win more games than you did a season ago. This Bills team was a 6-10 football team last year. This Bills team is a 6-10 football team this year. Here's my reasoning why. I've got questions about EJ Manuel, as do you. And if he can prove to be the guy, because I was never an EJ Manuel guy to begin with. So I've got questions. I've always had questions. I still lack the answers. So from that standpoint there, I'm not sold. You move on to something else that really troubles me. Can the Bills actually play that much better than they did defensively last season? 57 sacks. You can't be serious. You can't really think that they're going to duplicate that, especially losing their defensive coordinator, Mike Patton, who is now the head coach in Cleveland. I just don't see it happening. Third defensive coordinator in 3 years. He's going to come in, change the dynamic of this defense. I just don't know if Jim Schwartz is going to be able to get the same type of production out of these players that you got out of Mike Patton. I just don't know if that's the same or not. 23 interceptions, that's a heck of a lot of interceptions. I just don't know if the Bills can keep up with that type of pace. You lose Kiko Alonso. This guy was so instrumental in you getting better defensively. He's gone for the year. I wonder how good this linebacking core really is now without Kiko Alonso. I've got questions. And right now, I don't have enough answers with this Bills team. And they're still learning how to win. I will say this, with Doug Marrone being in the league for his second year, EJ Manuel having a year under his belt, that continuity, guys being a little bit more familiar with their surroundings and their situation, you got to feel good about that. But I just feel like there's still going to be those pitfalls with this Bills team. They still got to learn how to win. And honestly, that's where it is for me, is have they learned how to win yet? Can they figure out how to beat the Patriots? Can they figure out how not to go on the road against the Jets and lay an egg against Geno Smith? Can they figure out how to win the games that they're supposed to? You had the Kansas City Chiefs last year and you let them off the hook. Or should I say, Jeff Toole let them off the hook. You had the Atlanta Falcons last year and you let them off the hook. You had the New England Patriots last year and you let them off the hook. Can you find a way to win the games that you play well enough in to win? I don't know yet. You've got to prove. I don't give anybody anything. You got to prove it to me. And right now, the Bills are a 6-10 team, in my opinion. And so, that's going to do it for the Buffalo Bills and their lab report. Remember, if it happens in the National Football League, whether big or small, we cover it all here in the lab room. Thank you for joining me. That's been the Buffalo Bills and their lab report. Stay tuned. Join me next time as we'll be featuring the Cleveland Browns in their quest to become a better football team in 2014. 7 o'clock sharp. See you then. Like the content? Want more? Sub up.